All right, there we go. We're starting.
Okay, just so we have it, uh, what's your full name?
My full name, maiden or married?
Let's
My
go married.
my full name is Martha Jeanette Curry.
And your maiden name?
Martha Jeanette Baught, Baught.
Cool. All right. So, um, I wanted to hear a little bit about the first time. Like, how did you meet Papa? And first, what was his name? What's his full name?
His name was James Calvin Curry II.
And how'd you guys meet?
We met through Claudia and Argus Hamilton on a blind date. And there used to be a steak place in Oklahoma City. And right now the name has left me. Glenn's Steakhouse. And so we had a blind date, and it had to be on a Thursday, mostly Friday or Friday nights, because he was at the minister at Sulphur, Oklahoma at that time.
And how old were you?
How old was I?
About?
I was 22 and 3.
Mm-hmm. And so you both
I was teaching school at Midwest City.
And you both knew the Hamiltons? How?
The Hamiltons and the Currys were friends forever.
So the Argus's
Claudia
dad
met us, introduced us.
and Argus's dad knew Papa's dad?
Granddaddy Curry. They were contemporaries. Argus's daddy was a baseball player, and his mother was more of a preacher than his daddy.
Why do you say that?
Because their temperaments were completely different. Georgia, Argus's mother, was very talkative, very forward. Granddaddy was very quiet but very happy. The opposite was in the Curry family. Grandmother Curry hardly ever said anything but yes, Calvin, yes. Granddaddy was the very forward, meeting everybody, their personalities. But Granddaddy Hamilton would sit and smile and smoke his cigars. They both smoked cigars.
So Papa and Argus grew up together?
Yes. They grew up in parsonages. J.C. was more fortunate than Argus. Argus's daddy moved every year.
Wow.
And it just got to be terrible, so he had some good friends, or his sister did, in Tulsa. So Argus moved and lived with these good friends and graduated from Tulsa, from high school, and then went into the service.
Mm-hmm.
J.C. was more fortunate. They had bigger appointments. Granddaddy was the preacher. Grandmother Curry hardly, she just, yes, yes, yes. And he'd bring everybody home to eat. And the family had, you can remember this, if Granddaddy brought in someone, I grew up this way too, and they always had flour, they always had lard, and Grandmother would make more biscuits and whatever it was, and she would cook a hen, a chicken, for all of their 5 children to the mother and daddy and whoever else that granddaddy brought in. And she'd say FLO. Family lay off. And that stayed with the family. Even when they raised their FLO, family lay off.
Make sure that the guests
So they'd have enough to eat. But she always made gravy, and she always had biscuits. And that one chicken, just think about that.
Yeah.
Of course, the chickens then didn't have hormones and all of this stuff in it. They were bigger.
Mm.
But
so so how did you know? You knew Claudia or you knew Argus first?
well, my senior year or junior year, Claudia and Argus were assigned to Spiro.
And why
so
were you in Spiro?
I was junior in high school.
That's right.
And then
And so
that
and Claudia's your age or how much older?
JC's age, 7 years older than me, but we never knew that. We never knew how old Claudia was until I was taking her to the hospital, and Argus let it slip. 1926, I thought, my Lord, she's JC's age. Yeah. And so then I knew them, and then I graduated from college, and they moved to Stroud. The day that Daddy took me on Turner Turnpike for the first time, 1954, to get my job in Midwest City, and I walked in and came out with a job. And in the meantime, they were at Stroud, and then we stopped by. The house was wide open. They weren't home. Went to the bathroom, got us a drink, left them a note, and went on, and I got the job at Midwest City. So then they ended up coming to the village. And then...
Is that in Midwest City?
Mm-hmm. And then I lived in Midwest City 1 year, and then Maureen got married, so we went on to cut his water off. Then we moved in off of 23rd Street in Oklahoma City and lived.
Who did? You
Helen Ann. There were 3 of us that lived together. 3 of us. They graduated at midterm. They were that much older than me. I graduated the same year at the summer.
So they're
and
friends
then we
from
all
Spiro?
3 lived in a house.
3 friends from Spiro moved to Midwest City?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
then
their names were what?
Then what, honey?
What were their names?
Helen Ann Biswell and Maureen Tamblin and me. And we lived together 1 year in that big house. Had 4 bedrooms. People were overseas and rented their house. And then when Maureen got married, we went to Oklahoma City and lived on 23rd Street, in one of those great big houses like yours. We rented a bedroom until we could find somewhere to live. And now then, that is the place to be. That's where it's there by the Capitol. And I lived on Walnut, which was not a very good street. But this place was clean, and we had one side, and the mama and the daughter lived on the other side.
So mom and daughter, and then you two?
Uh-huh.
Because the third one got married.
Yeah, and we had our own front door and our own back door. And then...
And you were teaching
I was
Right.
teaching.
And
Helen
so,
Ann was working at medical research
and so, Argus and Claudia were
at the
there
village.
because that's where Argus was assigned as a
He was
minister.
the preacher. Hmm.
Okay. And he's the head, the lead,
And they built it.
that new church.
Uh-huh.
And he was the senior pastor there?
Yes.
Okay. And so, do you
And-
remember the conversation whenever Claudia was telling you about
Oh,
Argus'
yes.
friend?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Where were you?
They had, I was in Oklahoma City then. And,
In that house that you were living in?
yes.
Okay.
That's where I was living when JC went to Mayo's and
What's
got
Mayo's?
checked out in Minnesota, to have the checkup about his bladder problem.
In Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. And so he made me feel like that I was, when he asked me to marry him, I was giving up what I had to, not too much in the future, It was hard being a preacher's wife and all. Are you sure you want to do that, and all of this? And of course, Claudia and Argus were waiting till he left, so I'd call him and tell him. Then JC'd call Argus, and then there was quite
So,
a
I want to go
discussion.
back a second. So, you knew Claudia and Argus at the time, but you didn't know Argus's best friend, right?
I knew the Curry name.
You
I
did.
knew the Curry name because we had moved from Spiro to Wilburton, and they were at McAllister, the DS. They were the district superintendent.
Hmm.
JC was 7 years old,
Wow.
and
So you knew of the Curry name when
in the church.
you were. If JC was 7, then you would have been a brand new baby.
Yeah,
But you heard.
the Curry name in the Methodist church,
Yeah, I got you.
and we were big Methodists,
Mhm.
very active, and preachers always
Mm-hmm.
came to our house, and so anyway, then it had to be on a Thursday night. Occasional, he could come on Thursday night,
You would eat dinner
and
with.
he would stay with them
So the 4 of you guys would go to dinner.
sometimes, and sometimes it was just 2 of us
You and
because
and
they
JC?
had 2 children by then.
Okay, yeah. And you and JC would sometimes just eat together.
Yes,
So that started with just
yeah,
him.
just
And was he
eating
in
out.
Oklahoma City at that time?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was.
And then Billy was just a baby.
Billy is Argus and Claudia's
Uh-huh.
son.
And so JC would stay with the kids if they had to go somewhere, or I'd go over and stay. We stayed, kept the nursery at the church. Helen Ann and I did 2 or 3 times.
Who's Helen Ann? The roommate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we really didn't know that church was a growing church at that time. And there were so many kids in that nursery, we didn't know who was with who.
And was this the church that Argus and Claudia were at?
Village Methodist Church.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
still there.
And what was JC doing in Oklahoma City at the time?
He'd go to church meetings. If he had a meeting, then he'd make it. I took him to a school carnival. I had a carnival at school, and he had to go with me.
But was he a minister in
At
that
Sulphur.
area? Sulphur.
At Sulphur.
Okay. And how far away is that from Oklahoma City?
Well, it's off of 35. You turn off at Ardmore.
So not close.
No, it'd take an hour,
Yeah.
2 hours.
But he'd come into Oklahoma City for.
And then the
Business.
nights he'd come in, he'd stay with Lucille
Oh.
because it was closer.
Okay. Yeah. Lucille
And
and
he'd
Clarence.
stay there a lot.
Gotcha.
And
So you were doing dinner and then at what point did you think that he might be the one?
I really think, I thought from the very beginning that might be the one. But he was so formal. Oh my goodness. Oh my.
How so?
He was very, very polite, just uh, I I really thought that he would be the one. But I knew after we went together teaching, see, I had all summer off. And I knew that if I left Oklahoma City area, that was too far from Sulphur to Spiro. That's too hard. So I went to the Capitol and I talked it over with Daddy. And there was a senator that lived in Heavener. And so Daddy said, "You want me to talk to Clem and see if he can help you get a job?" And I said, "No, I want to do it all by myself." Well, unbeknownst to me, Daddy had him to write a letter of recommendation
To somebody in Sulphur?
in Heavener,
And how
who
far
was
away
a
is
state
that?
senator. It's by Spiro.
Right,
Hold on.
but where were you trying to find a job? What
At
town?
the state capitol.
Ah, okay.
At-
But Papa was still in Sulphur at that,
He
right?
was still at Sulphur, but I was trying to stay in the area so that it would be that he hadn't asked me to marry him yet.
Mm-hmm.
See, so I went pussyfooting in the Capitol, and they were sorry they just didn't have anything. They sent me here and sent me there. I pulled out my big fine letter, and we may have a place in the highway department. And they put me to work with inventory. I never typed so many numbers and screws and bolts and stuff like that. I worked there almost 2 months, and JC asked me to marry him one Friday night. That next Monday, I put my deal in, and I gave him 2 weeks' notice and headed to Spiro.
Wow. So what? Do you remember when he asked you to marry him and how he did it and all that?
How? Oh, he just got down on his knees and asked me to marry him. And it's not going to be fun. He put it on a bleak side.
Where were you? Were you at a dinner or at
in
home?
that house over there off of 13th Street.
The house with your roommate.
With roommate. She wasn't there that weekend. She's from Chandler, and this old woman had dementia, the mother, and while we were gone, she'd go over and get the mail and go through it, and she even opened some of it. And when we found out about it, Helen Ann said, "My daddy is a postmaster in Chandler, Oklahoma, and this is illegal, and you could go to prison." She turned to her daughter and said, "You know she could go to prison? They don't care whether she knows what she's doing or not." That's the end of that. They didn't do that anymore. But that old woman did it.
Yeah.
I can still see them.
Going through your mail?
Oh my.
What was she looking for?
Money.
Oh. Wow.
She opened our bills to see how much our electric bill, water bill, and all of that. Oh, she was a character, but...
So he just came over one night, and did he do anything romantic or anything like that you remember?
He, that year before we married, it was conference, and the conference was in Tulsa. And that's the time he had that Mercury. We should have kept mine. Had a bird on it, and he had, I guess he introduced me, it was in May, as his fiance at that conference, because we married that September. And he had to bring me home, and then he had to go back to Tulsa that night so he could get up early and go to conference the next day, Monday. And coming, he hit a skunk. Oh my Lord, that car smelled to high heaven.
So he's driving to you.
From Oklahoma City. I was living then in Oklahoma City off of 13.
And he was driving to Oklahoma City to come
to Tulsa.
to come ask you to marry him.
Uh-huh.
And to
No,
ask,
he'd already asked me to
oh, this is later. Okay.
marry him
I see.
because that was the conference before we married in September.
Okay. And
See,
so how
he
long
had
were
been
you
a-
engaged?
He'd been a widower, a bachelor for 7 years.
Yeah.
But he had had many, many relationships. And the last one he had was a highway patrolman's wife. She
Papa
had
was-
divorced him.
Okay. They weren't still
They were
married.
divorced, and he was going with Isla Mae. Well, years later, when we got to Chickasha, Isla Mae's brother was superintendent of schools and a member of our church. And one Easter, we had 2 services. At the early service, Isla Mae was there, and the girls said that, boy, I was not a happy camper, and he knew it.
Is that the one where
years later?
she
that-
ran up to the front of the church and gave him a big hug?
Yeah. And
And you
so-
guys, if I remember this story correctly,
And-
you guys would go home and fix lunch,
yes,
and he stayed back at the
That
church.
is right.
And normally you guys would wait
That's
until
right.
he got home to eat
I
lunch,
would have been there.
but not that day.
And they were big Methodists. I mean, they were very, very
Mm-hmm.
good Methodists. His brother and his wife, and she still lived in Oklahoma City. I don't think she was married again, but she had kids.
So about how old were you when you got married again? 22, 23?
Mm-hmm.
So he
23.
was about 30,
Yeah,
right? And
that's right. He was 30.
Was he at what church when you guys ended up getting married? Was he the pastor?
We got married at Spyro.
And that's where he was the pastor at that Spyro church?
The Spyro Church preacher married us, which was a no-no. The DS in Sulphur, Ardmore District, got mad
Because you didn't do it in Sulphur?
because he didn't get to marry us and we
Oh.
didn't do it at Sulphur.
Why did you guys go to Spyro?
To Spyro because that was my home
hmm
and that was my home church. I'd been a member of that church since I was 3 months old. And
How far is Spyro from Sulphur?
a drive. It was a drive. You'd
Yeah.
go 69 into Durant, and then Sulphur was on up closer to 35. And the Ardmore district at that time was Ardmore, clear to Ada, Sulphur, Paws Valley, Wynniewood, but now then it's all different.
So, do you know, did Papa talk to Granddaddy Vaught before he asked you?
Yes, he came to Spyro,
And he didn't know?
and talked to him. See, I was in the city.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, he did. And
Did
first,
Granddaddy
Mother and
Vaught?
Daddy weren't too excited about me marrying a preacher. Daddy particularly.
How come?
Well, because, honey, you have to marry for love. you can't marry for money.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's
And
right.
so when we got married, I sold my car. We should have kept mine.
Yeah.
And I bought myself a cashmere coat because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to buy anything for a while, and then I didn't know the kids were coming pretty fast. But he was older, and here I am. See, he's been gone 13 years. Somebody told me they were going with an married an older man, 12 years older. I said, oh boy, you better stay well, because more than likely you'll be taking care of him. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But wouldn't put anything, I'd do it again.
Yeah.
But
What do you remember about your wedding day?
about what?
About the wedding?
It was hot. Yeah, little church, you know.
And what day did you guys get married on?
We got married on Labor Day weekend,
What year?
1956. 1956. I don't know whether you saw these pictures or not, but this is when your mother and Al took me.